digestion. This is really the hub of Ayurveda, and as well as yoga too, and really on a lot of levels. Yoga deals with that navel center, that digestive center. Well, the physical is important, but once you clear out the physical, yoga really deals with the subtle energetic currents of that navel center, how to channel energy to that center and then circulate it in the body. So if you are doing a hatha practice or some kind of other yogic practices that involve working with the energies, if you don't have an awareness of that vital center, or if your teachers don't, then you might want to look into that a little more to really understand the deeper aspects of what you're doing and why you're doing it, because it's really, really crucial. Now, the first concept to keep in mind when we're looking more at the Ayurvedic lens is that everyone has a different digestive capacity, and one should only eat to their own capacity, both in the quantity of foods they eat as well as the quality of the foods they eat. So, some people may be able to handle heavier foods, some people lighter foods, some people may be able to eat more foods than another. So once again, it's really impossible to give blanket statements. Even for, different doshas, you can't give a blanket statements like, oh, well, Pitta people have better digestion, so they can eat more food. Like that, a Pitta person can have many different forms. A Pitta predominant person can have many different forms of digestion. So, you can't just say that, and it has to be looked at on an individual basis. It's important to keep part of the stomach empty, because this leaves room for prana to circulate, and because of this also the food digests easier. If you stuff yourself too much, if you put too, your diaphragm's not going to be able to release enough. You often can become short of breath. This will impact your mind. The food's not going to move as quickly as easily as it can through the tract. The nutrients will get absorbed. The whole thing will just get really, messy and backed up, basically. So keeping some amount of space in the body, eating to where you're not quite full is a good general approach, so that there is still some lightness after you eat. And just like how we looked at sleeping, I want to look at how we come into a meal. It's not a matter of just, getting the food and eating it, but once again, how you approach the food makes a big difference on how it's going to end up in your organism on both a physical and a subtle level. First of all, the best foods are prepared by someone trust, love, or maybe an establishment where that there's some good energy going into that food, because the subtle energy of a cook, whoever's cooking that food, will be in that food. I used to kind of blow this off a lot because it's just like, oh yeah, subtle and blah blah blah, like kind of thing. And I never really appreciated this fact until I started hanging around my guru, my spiritual teacher, her center, her ashram. And so I started hanging around there, and she has very, very strict standards on how food is handled, by whom, what dishes get washed with what items. I mean, there's just a lot of details that have to do with keeping the purity of the energy around the food, as well as the sattvic, this kind of clear nature around the food. And it's kept to a very, very high standard there. And the food there, it's like nothing I've experienced. And it's palpable of how these more subtle aspects to cooking food really make a difference to what's going into the food, both in a yogic way as well as an Ayurvedic way. And really the same dish prepared in the same way, without attention to some of these kind of subtle energetic patterns, will have a different effect on your system, ultimately, a different effect on your mind. And this is a subtlety that both yoga and Ayurveda speak to, and it's palpable. The more you practice, the more you get touch with it, the more you'll see how it's really true. So you need to be careful with where and how you eat the food. Also, along with this idea is leftovers. Ideally, no leftovers possible, or a day at most. And I know nowadays, once again, it's hard to live by these standards, but after so much time, prana leaves the food, and it's just old, it's stale, it's not conducive to health in the long run. So something to keep in mind. Now, the next most important thing I want to talk about is, and I'm leaving out quite a lot of details to focus on, so I'm just trying to focus on some of the most potent things to do, as well as straightforward, simple things to do. But before you eat, back to this knowledge of the right nostril, left nostril, is you want to see that your right nostril is open. And this goes back to the idea of the solar channel. The right nostril is the solar channel, which is most conducive to your digestion. While the lunar channel, this kind of channel controlled by the moon, is more conducive to watery substances and drinking liquids. So you shouldn't be drinking a lot of liquids with your meals as well, by the way. But if your right channel's not open, if you find that your left channel's open, or if you find your sushumna's open, go meditate. But if your left channel's open, you can lay on your left side. This is the easiest, most direct way I found to work with this, but you want to lay on your left side and just press your armpit into the ground and leave your right armpit open. And you'll notice that after, it shouldn't take more than, maybe a few minutes, maybe three minutes, 5 minutes, maybe if you're really blocked up. But after a few minutes, you should find that your right nostril's open. And, there's other ways to open the nostril, but this one's easy. Most anyone can do it. And it works. And this is going to help you digest your food better. It seems weird, but just if you don't believe me, really just try it. Eat the same 2 meals on 2 different days, and have one with the left nostril open, one with the right nostril open, and see if you could, gauge which meal was easier to digest, and get back to me. I know it's worked for me personally, and it's just a really useful tip. So a lot of doctors will actually recommend, you might see that they recommend laying on your left side after a meal. And they often couch it in terms of peristalsis and, it's your descending colon and all this other stuff. But really the real secret behind this is the nostril dominance. And ideally it has more use if you do it before the meal. And, it can still be done if you forget to, you can still lay on the left side after the meal, and it will have some usefulness. But if you do it before the meal, you'll find it, it'll be clear, it'll be easier to work with. And just a note of caution too, please don't mess with this technique too much without more knowledge. Some people can abuse, working with the nostrils for a lot of different functions. And when you start messing with the nadis and manipulating them a lot, you really start working with more of the subtle energetics, which can have repercussions physically, psychologically, and other things. So, just please stick to those couple simple things I'm doing here for now, and see what it does for you. Now, when you go to eat your meal, perhaps above all the other things that we've talked about, this is a really, really key one, is you need to chew your food thoroughly. This is where digestion starts, right in the mouth here. And, it's not just a simple physical fact. Obviously, yes, you're chewing it and you're making less work for your digestive tract to have to break down all this food later. But there's also the fact that within the saliva, within the oral cavity, certain enzymes are released at this stage of digestion that's necessary to properly break down food. And all of this is, backed by modern physiology as well. So if you don't chew your food enough before you swallow it, it won't be digested properly in the stomach. It'll tax your system. It'll create, what's called ama, or loosely identified as toxins and so forth. So you have to chew your food till it's in a mush-like state. It's fully, the saliva is fully mixed in with its and And this has other added benefits as well. It slows down your mind. It lets you savor the flavors of the food. And it also alerts. So when you taste things in your body, it alerts your body to release, certain hormones and other enzymes and things, so that these chemicals are released, and it prepares your body for the food that's coming. So it's really an intelligent function happening there in the oral cavity, where if you just chew a couple times and then swallow it quickly, as a lot of us do, this practice is so hard for people. They just can't wait to eat and swallow it. And it's this, mental forwardness that's coming. So really, if there's one practice that you're going to need to not only come back time and time again to, because it's been, so ingrained, and this is such a hard pattern to break for a lot of people, but it's such a simple one that's going to have such a huge impact on your health. Can't speak enough about it. So, keep coming back to it every time you chew your food. Look at what you're doing. So simple, but so useful. And now when you go to actually eat your meals, Ayurveda recommends having each of the 6 tastes present, basically in various levels, depending on a whole bunch of factors that I won't get into. Basically, they recognize 6 different tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, or pungent, bitter, and astringent. And that's detail, but what I want to call attention to, along with this, they speak to the order we eat our food in. So what tastes are predominant, and in what order should we eat those tastes when we're eating our meal? And generally, that order of the foods we eat should follow sweet, then sour, then salty, then pungent, then bitter, then astringent. And note that sweet it's not just like chocolate cake or something, but the sweet taste is found in a lot of things like rice or milk and grains. Things like that are considered sweet. So this ordering of the taste, there's actually quite a sound logic of it, and it gets quite detailed into their digestive functions. But the basics of it is that you're trying to eat moist and heavier foods, which is what the sweet taste represents, and sour, salty can have some moisture in it. But then there's increasingly, you'll see that some of the hotter tastes come up, which aids in the digestion. And then at the end of it all, you're eating items that are more drying to the system. So you need some liquid, you need some heat in order to digest food properly, and only then, by drying out the system, will we be done. And this parallels what's happening in the digestive tract in order, because food gets dried out last in the colon. And so because of this, eating a salad, like a lot of people kind of eat reverse of this. They'll eat their salad first and they'll eat their cake last. So basically, you're drying out your system. You're eating dry elements, so you're kind of dousing your Agni. And a lot of people are drinking cold water, which it's not recommended if you don't know that by now, drink warm temperature or room temperature or warm liquids if you're drinking while you're eating. But they'll slow down their digestion to begin with, and then they start eating their main meal, and then at the end of it they have a cake, which is just the heaviest thing to digest. So while your body's busy digesting all this other stuff, you're throwing cake on top of it, and there you go, you're done. So the basic thrust of it: eat the heaviest items first, the lightest items towards the end of the meal, moist first, those things which are drying to the system at the end of the meal. Which is the general pattern. And there are different ways to mix this up to use depending on certain individual types. So this is just a general pattern. If you have lower digestive function, sometimes we recommend to take some warm water right at the beginning of the meal, which will help the digestion get going as well. So if you do have sluggish digestion, that's something you can do. But in general, you don't want to be drinking a lot of water with the meal. And a lot of other variations I won't get in, because it gets once again to the specifics. But as a general pattern, try this out. Once again, try eating similar meals, same things, and changing just the order of what you eat and how you eat it, and see what effect that has on how the meal's digested, how the mind's functioning. and learn from it. Don't take my word for it. All this stuff I'm giving can be practically done, and you can see how it's going to affect your health. And before, when people hear six tastes, it automatically conjures up a smorgasbord of different meal options. So, don't get all crazy. This is another thing a lot of people do. But you don't want to get really crazy with eating all sorts of different food items with your meals. Generally, it's best to keep your meals simple and limited to a few items. And because what you do when you start mixing all these different things is, once again, it confuses the body. Different food items require different enzymes, different things to digest properly. And so it creates a lot of taxing on the body. So the simpler, the more directed the meals can be, the better. And this also goes into even things like mixing hot and cold foods together, or old foods and new foods. So there's a lot of qualitative differences that Ayurveda gets into as well that will affect how you're combining the foods. But there is a deep science to how different food items combined. And so what a lot of people are doing nowadays, like the smoothie craze, for example, they think just because, okay, I'm putting a lot of healthy things into my smoothie, that must be I'm getting more healthy. It's a very basic idea that people are approaching their health from. Okay, well, strawberries are said to be healthy for me, and kale is too. I'll put them together, and yogurt it has probiotics. So all these things, they think they're healthy, they put them together, they mash it up into this sludge that their body doesn't know what to do with, and then their body's confused, can't digest it properly, and they may feel lighter and more energetic because they're eating a light meal, but really there's not a lot of health to be had there when you're doing such things. And so some of the biggest kind of things that people kind of mix that Ayurveda recommends not to do is basically trying to keep your fruits separate as possible from your other foods, particularly melons. Some fruits can be cooked with other foods to a decent effect, but in general, eating fruits on their own is highly advised. Another thing is like beans shouldn't be taken with like yogurt or cheese or eggs or meat or milk, or some of these other common things that you might see, like if you go out and get a burrito, all sorts of things are mixed in there, and you want to be careful with that. And in general, mixing different types of proteins is heavy on the system. If you're going to eat a heavy protein, try to stick with one heavy protein if you're eating it. And then two, like mixing, milk or yogurt with fruits as well is, I said keep fruits separate, but that's another big thing that a lot of people do that is just, once again, confusing to the system, not recommended, and, something you can experiment with. Along with this too, another fad that is happening is Ayurveda does not recommend raw foods. Basically, raw foods are seen as antithesis to the qualities of both digestion as well as the body in itself, because raw foods induce lightness in the body. They're fairly rough. They can dry out the body over time, and really the body is moist. It's warm, it's got heavier elements in it. So we want to build the body. We want to keep it moist, and we want to keep it warm. That engenders health over a long period of time. And this is really a touchy topic for many, many people, especially in the health world. And there's even people these days mixing Ayurveda with raw food and saying they're compatible, but technically, if you look at the teachings of Ayurveda, they do not recommend raw food for a lot of reasons. And if somebody is recommending this under an Ayurvedic context, I would really tell you to look, see what lineage that they got this information for, or what bona fide Ayurvedic physician taught them this, or they studied under. If you do find someone who's teaching this on with some really in-depth knowledge, please let me know, because I haven't seen it myself. Just a point to make out there. And there are cases where eating light foods, as part of a highly eliminative diet, cases such as cancer, or if you have been living with toxins for a very long time and doing all sorts of stuff to your body, a lot of times it seemingly helps patients. So I'm not denying that, yes, there is some things happening out there where there are some shifts in people. My main thing I'm pointing out here is that it should be monitored, especially over long periods of time. I've known people to do this, and they end up very sick. And it has all the classic signs of vata vitiation, like we were talking about before, over time. And it's just really obvious what's going on from this Ayurvedic lens. But people, once again, with a lot of these vitiations, they don't want to listen to other people's advice. They want to do what they think is healthy, what they believe to be healthy, and it's just a very tricky situation. So I'm not trying to be so critical. I'm just merely trying to point out what Ayurveda does teach, what's there, and what's coming up in the modern age, and what's more or less being invented. And if it stands the test of time, fine. But I'm just this is what is taught. Now, if you do decide to change your food choices based on any of the above, please, it's important to note that Ayurveda says you shouldn't eat things that you're not habituated to. So because of our geographical location or ancestry or any number of things, like some cultures can't process milk, for example, which is huge in Ayurveda, but doesn't work for some cultures, which is fine, So you have to use those items which are agreeable to your body, which are in your environment, which, you may have become accustomed to. So even if you become accustomed to eating processed hot dogs and things like this, that's what you're used to. And you have to slowly make changes away from certain paradigms to what is healthy, without forcing your body to do it just because you think it's healthy, or just because you have access to it. Because we have access to things from all around the world, and which we've never had access to before. But just throwing that in the mix once again can confuse the body, because it's like, what is this foreign substance doing in me again? So so many details to this, but don't rush into anything. Once again, that basic parameter. And at the same time too, don't take that as an excuse to just stay in your patterns for a long time and take longer than it really needs. So there's a fine line there to work with. But the last thing I really want to talk about on this basics of digestion before we jump into seasonal eating is how you defecate. The closer, how you let go of your stool. Just like we looked at how you wake up, how do you go to the bathroom, right? It's important how you finish. And essentially what's really recommended is that you squat when you defecate. It's so healthy for you. This really allows the colon to completely empty. It encourages the downward flow of energy, what's called the Apanavayu in these traditions. It just makes it easier to eliminate in all manners. So even if you have a Western toilet, it's pretty easy to jump up onto the toilet and squat. There are devices sold that will enable you to do this, but it's really important. If not, things can collect in your colon just due to the angle there of the rectum and so forth. So it might be weird at first, but once you start doing it, it makes a huge difference, and you kind of can't stop after that. And it's also ideal to use water actually to cleanse the anus when you're done, if possible, by getting something like a bidet or something that you can attach to your toilet. And they're pretty simple mechanisms, they're pretty cheap, and because using tissue paper can actually irritate the mucosal lining. And this is why a lot of in the East, this is what a lot of people do. They're done going to the bathroom, you wash with water, you use your left hand. Another reason why the right hand is used for a lot of things, amongst others. There's other reasons, but using tissue paper, it's pretty aggravating, and that's a very gentle area down there. But a lot of people need tissue paper, unfortunately, because it can get quite messy just if your digestive patterns are very off. Once again, something to work for, some things to keep in mind and implement over time.